my Minnesota upbringing and education, being a Unitarian Universalist in Fort Collins, a 1996 semester at sea 100-day world voyage, and finally joining Mountain Vista UU in Tucson in 2007. Raised in Hopkins, Minnesota, a pleasant suburb of Minneapolis, by parents of Swedish and Bohemian heritage, among other largely Northern Europeans who settled in the upper Midwest, my life was definitely a white experience of privilege through my family's hard work. They provided college educations and opportunities for their 3 children. However, my parents seldom encountered any racial diversity and had definite biases toward those who didn't resemble them. When Mom or Dad made biased comments about strangers, I spoke up. People who meet may look different on the outside, but inside we all have the same needs and wants in life, like food, home, and safety for those we love. I first encountered ethnic diversity at the University of Minnesota, where I was fascinated from afar by the ace black football and basketball players, though we never interacted in classes or socially. At my freshman dorm, I met a young woman who didn't look like me, Sally Jo, from Kailua, Oahu, in the Hawaiian Islands. She was half Hawaiian and half Swedish and had attended Kamehameha School in Honolulu for those with at least half Hawaiian blood. When we both took third-year French and university choir, our friendship flourished. She taught me about her culture, including the multicultural ethnic groups that had migrated, married, and raised families in the islands, where they lived together in the aloha spirit. Even though I'd had no similar experience up to age 18, she made me wonder how that would feel in my world. When I invited Sally to our house for dinner, my parents surprised me by welcoming her to her home away from home. The next summer, Sal and I hatched a scheme to take the train to LA, fly to Honolulu, and spend 2 months with her parents, working part-time and touring on weekends. I got a job as a hotel maid in Waikiki, the only haole or white employee. I loved meeting her parents, all her dad's siblings, and her younger brother Pierre, who became my pen pal after my visit. My parents, who hardly ever took vacations, visited Sally's parents in Hawaii the following summer. Memories they made were relived through letters and photos for many years. Through these experiences, I dared hope that I'd move my parents out of their comfort zones into the world of, quote, more similarities than differences. When my first husband and I divorced, I asked for minimal child support and maximum visitation for our 3 children, and John agreed. The kids and I joined Foothills UU Church, my coming home experience with people and beliefs that supported my evolving vision of equity and justice. I took an entry-level position in the Colorado State University Department of English, where I took a free class every quarter. Every step forward invigorated me, building confidence for whatever lay ahead for me and my family. Over 10 years, I moved on to the history department as an administrative secretary, earned a second BA in English, and began graduate courses. The kids' dad remarried and moved to Idaho, then to Montana, where the kids visited for 2 months during summer break. One summer, I joined a history trip to Egypt and Israel, my first travel overseas that would grow an appetite for more. Hearing from the history professors about semester at sea, a 100-day, 11-port voyage around the world, I decided to interview for my 16-year-old daughter and me in fall 1986. When I heard that the Asian history professor was selected as administrative dean, he invited me to go. But my daughter, Carrie, said, "Mom, I can't. I don't want to leave Fort Collins. Maybe I can stay with Karen and her family." Under no rush to accept immediately, I spent time considering what I'd have to organize for the trip, including research for my master's before the 7-year limit. When Carrie talked to Karen's family, they agreed to write a guardianship contract and to a minimal monthly payment for 3 months' room and board. I signed my contract, found renters to cat sit, extended my master's a year, and packed my suitcases and studies, hoping I'd done the right thing. Truthfully, the 2-week crossing to Japan kept us so busy that I questioned my choice to set adrift from everything familiar to pursue a long, lonely adventure. In reality, shipboard life created extended families quickly, and I always had my thesis work to do. Yes, I did meet Jim, the biology professor, and my boss met Monica, the residence hall director on the Love Boat. In letters home, I raved about the greatest trip imaginable, partly because it affirmed that soapbox speech I delivered years ago on biases. However, My wake-up call came for those around the world whose equity would require organized allies to be realized. After a year's long-distance courtship, Jim and I married in September 1988 at the UU Church in Fort Collins, with all 6 children present, along with Dad, Mom, and my sister as maid of honor, and several other family members and good friends. Following MA graduation in December, my house on Duke Lane sold. We moved everything into a farmhouse Jim had rented in Millville, Utah. In transition, I took some time off to adapt to being in relationship again and living in a different place. When I felt ready, I took a part-time typing job at Cache Valley Hospital, revising departmental procedures for a 5-year review, which convinced me that I'd better apply at Utah State, where I accepted a position at Student Services as secretary to the administrative dean, which encouraged me to return to an academic department, this time in political science, located in Old Main, with interesting activist professors and students. In 1993, Jim applied for a sabbatical in Australia for 6 months, followed by another 6 months assignment near Aiken, South Carolina. I volunteered to tutor Black high school students to pass written essays prior to graduation. Our car trip back to Utah became a justice-inspired time with our visit to the Martin Luther King Church and Memorial in Atlanta, Georgia. Reading his wisdom and feeling his courage, I set new goals: to volunteer with the Humane Society and to seek my UU path again when a way appeared. We drove to the Ogden UU Church so Jim could experience a service. After several visits, Reverend Sarah mentioned that someone named Diane, a writer friend of mine, had called from Logan about starting a fellowship there. We put an ad in the Herald Journal for a meeting upstairs at her bookstore. Sarah drove from Ogden when 35 people met to form a 10-person steering committee to organize Cache Valley UUs. We rented Sunday afternoon space at a community center in an old 2-story schoolhouse. Mike organized forums on current topics, and some experienced UU members offered lay-led services and religious education for children. When I read that the UUA president, John Burens, would be in Salt Lake, I contacted his Boston office about chartering our 50-person congregation, something he'd never experienced with a church of this size. He welcomed this opportunity to speak at our signing ceremony. I was hired as a paid RE director for children's programs. We also hired a retired minister from Fort Collins who drove over every 2 weeks, and a student intern from Salt Lake who filled in during winter. When membership grew, we applied for the UUA's 5-year extension ministry program with financial support from 2 congregations, UU congregations in Salt Lake. We called a minister and moved to Sunday mornings at the senior center near downtown Logan for 3 years. One of our own members enrolled at Star King Seminary in Berkeley, California to become a minister. Meanwhile, we hired another member as interim lay leader. During the ramp up to the Iraq War, members stood with other liberal churches against the war in downtown Logan. When a UU couple who'd retired to Logan from Florida offered to finance a permanent home for CVUU near the USU campus, we started an active youth program by refurbishing the garage into a youth center where GLBT teens could hang out. Thanks to that generous loan, paid on for many years by members and friends, CVUU has a permanent place to grow and remain active. As Jim and I neared retirement, we knew that we wanted to relocate to somewhere in the West where all of our children lived. Off and on for 5 years, we traveled in Harvey the RV to Oregon, California, Arizona, Texas, and New Mexico to find our retirement home. When Tucson emerged as our top choice with 2 UU churches, UC-NWT felt more friendly and welcoming, so we bought a home in the neighborhood. I longed to be involved in something greater to do in community with other like-minded people, just as we had in Logan. For me, this challenge meant engaging those who had not yet experienced equality and justice in our new hometown. When we joined the church, I volunteered with membership for 2 years, but the challenge was no longer there. I attended a few social action justice meetings where I found dedicated friends who promoted mostly church donations to various nonprofits, but not much actual outreach to the Tucson community other than Emily Ricketts, who seemed to be the church's main out there liaison. Around the same time, our minister of 14 years resigned. We were assigned an interim minister for 2 years, someone who would help reinvigorate and guide us. Rev Joy gave us her undivided efforts with new ideas, games, surveys, everything she could think of to get us activated again in preparation for calling a new permanent minister. Joy was supercharged, just the minister we needed to inspire greater action. 2 years passed busily and quickly. We celebrated everything Joy helped us accomplish, including selection of our best qualified members to join the ministerial search team, a rigorous, not for the faint of heart undertaking for any UU church's future. Much of the team's work was strictly confidential until the time came to share progress with the congregation. When they revealed Pastor Ron Ferris as the #1 candidate, we were excited to learn that he'd recently completed seminary in Austin, Texas, that is, he and his wife and young twin daughters were ministering in Glendale, Arizona, and that his mom and dad were longtime Arizona residents from Sierra Vista. We approved him as our new minister and installed him with great ceremony at our neighboring Lutheran church. The most significant news to me was that what someone on the search committee said: this candidate has a heart for social action and justice, and we have seen Ron's special gift in action over the past 3 years. We expanded a new Justice Coordinating Committee to 4 members plus Rev Ron, and this steering group has invited the entire congregation to join the Committee of the Whole for quarterly meetings to assess goals for justice work and hear progress reports from JCC liaisons to our community nonprofits. At Sunday, soon, April 17th's upcoming COW meeting, members and friends will discuss and vote on our second issue for the next big picture lens through which to view our justice work. A month later, the JCC hopes to invite the whole congregation to nominate and vote on their most highly regarded nonprofit community organizations, 2 first responders, and 2 strategic change agents for justice outreach over the years. In my MVU justice dream, I imagine, quote, what we can build on new land, a building with windows to the sky and sun, and doors open so wide that we'll move outside our walls to welcome all who share our principles. I expect and hope MVUU will mature fully, realizing our vision to transform ourselves and our world through love, justice, and peace.
My parents were good people, doing the best they knew how in dealing with their own struggles, but I didn't understand that at the time. They never resolved their differences, arguing over and over and over again about the same issues. What I learned from family interactions and my mother's harsh criticism was to react. And my reaction, fight or flight, was flight, away from conflict at all costs. I learned to be a good girl who didn't question and to keep my opinions to myself, essentially to become as invisible as possible. In my late teens, friends and other young people were marching and protesting injustices. Although I agreed with their points of view, the thought of joining them, risking arrest, jail time, or even physical harm was scary. If I didn't feel safe expressing myself at home, opening myself up to the world was terrifying. The quiet and shy child grew up to be an introverted and very private grown-up. For many of my adult years, time, energy, and thoughts were focused on my daughter and my job, and as a single mom, trying to do the best for both. When my daughter was in high school, the 2 of us began serving at the Salvation Army's Thanksgiving dinners, and we did that for several years. After she was on her own, I began to look for other ways to share and to give thanks for the blessings in my life. I co-chaired the Daffodil Days fundraiser for cancer research, participated in the 24-hour Relay for Life, again for cancer research. I donated seeds, seedlings, and other supplies to a botanical garden that grew more than 800 pounds of vegetables annually for the local food bank. And I donated financially to various charities, Heifer Foundation, Doctors Without Borders, UNICEF. But none of this was quite as personal, as hands-on as I wanted. Education is powerful, and it is my passion. I wanted to take this passion beyond the university office where I worked and the classroom where I taught part-time. After I'd completed a course at the public library to learn how to help adults learn to read, the director asked me to lead a new workshop for adults who had tested out of the reading program at a 6th grade level and who wanted to continue working on their literacy skills. For 5 years, I volunteered one night a week to help speakers of English as a second language, as well as native speakers with reading, comprehension, and writing. With no set curriculum, we were able to work together on ways the group members could reach the goals that they had set for themselves. I heard stories and perspectives from other cultures and walks of life that helped me to become a more open person. For the past 11 years, I have volunteered with the Marana School District, tutoring children in the primary grades. Why these particular grades? There is an urban myth that I have been guilty of repeating, that corrections departments use 3rd grade reading scores to predict the number of prison beds they'll need. While this is technically untrue, there are undeniably strong correlations among failure to read proficiently by the end of 3rd grade, failure to graduate from high school, and incarceration rates. Reading is taught in the first 3 grades, and after that, children are not so much learning to read, but using their reading skills to learn other subjects. If children can't read proficiently at grade level, they struggle to comprehend the subject matter. For the better part of 2 mornings a week, I encourage children to read, finding books and other materials about topics that interest them, supporting their efforts, and praising their successes. Sadly, the extra time and attention does not always overcome the effects of other aspects of their lives. It is important to me to use my abilities to connect to issues and concerns beyond my own. However, I also want to get enjoyment from the work I do. This may be selfish. Nevertheless, I believe that much of my effectiveness in tutoring is connected to the joy I receive from that work, joy that the children sense when we are together. I continue to donate financially, mostly to local charities, including MVUU's charity baskets. I participate in Marana Food Bank events, like the Walk to End Childhood Hunger. I donate clothing, household goods, and other items to Primavera, and food to ICS. This meandering path of mine is probably not the usual take on justice work, but maybe some of you can relate to my journey. Until I began coming to MVUU, and for many years prior, my spiritual practices were unconnected to any congregation. My spirituality found expression in love for family and friends, in gardening, in singing, in walking out in nature. I am grateful to you, this congregation, for giving me a place where I can develop my sense of justice as spiritual practice and where I feel safe to be myself. I am blessed to be part of this MVUU family, but I'm still not brave.
I hope so. For this occasion, I have tried to identify just what it is that draws me to justice work. I grew up in Bloomfield, Connecticut, in a bucolic setting, but the houses were actually close together, but it was bucolic. As a little girl, I played with the state kids, who were African American kids as little as I was. We 4-year-olds hugged and kissed each other a lot. We were friends. As I recall, our next-door neighbor was a black physician. Later, my best teacher was an imaginative black woman who had attended Middlebury College. She taught us 7th graders choral speaking, such as, "Lay me on an anvil, O God! Beat me and hammer me into a steel spike." This is what we learned in her class. Oh, you're laughing. Well, I was in 7th grade, and I can't tell you how much excitement, and inspiration this gave me. Through several moves in and out of North Hartford, I grew to know many black kids and lived in neighborhoods with predominantly Italians, Jews, and Irish. I was a skinny Protestant kid who, with my family, attended the North Methodist Church across town. In other words, I was a minority. This explains a lot. This is why I say I am part Jewish, part Italian, part black. When I grew older, I was surprised to find that WASPs, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, were considered the power structure in the US. But that was then. Recently, attending the February UU Jazz workshop in Chandler called Intersection of Race, Poverty, and Justice in Arizona, it seemed an important thing to attend. And my husband and Reverend Ron and Reverend Christiana and Debbie also attended. The man who moderated the discussion had several questions for the young women who were being interviewed, each of whom was active in and ready to be a spokesperson for her own community. A Navajo, vivacious powerhouse of a woman who produced for us a 19-page booklet on Navajo projects. A Latina, she seemed a little younger than the others and had a very feminine and insightful way of making her points. And a black woman, Anae Bickham, currently executive director of the Arizona Black Voter Alliance. As I recall, when Ms. Bickham was asked the question, what would our community be like if the things she was working on came to pass, she paused. Then it became apparent that she was fighting back tears. The pause continued. We waited, and then she gave her answer. But while we waited, I suddenly felt the depth of her feeling and some measure of the feelings of every black person who grows up in a society that in many ways has rejected them. No examples are necessary. We all know them across the board. Of course, the loving elements of our society exist and have worked toward overcoming obstacles in the way of that are in the way of true equality. I believe in every instance that rejection has taken place, we should speak up, write letters, demonstrate, contribute to the well-being of our fellow human beings. And by the way, her answer to how can we get to the promised day was, listen. Listen. Hear what black people feel is important. Support them, but step back and allow them to flourish and gain the justice and respect that they and their ancestors have longed for and deserve. I say, whatever created us all, multicolored as we are, created the planet and the marvelous world in which we live, and which we must work towards saving night and day.